We're live.
Okay. It is 7:03, and I will call this Poolesville Planning Commission meeting to order. It looks like we have all 5 commissioners in attendance, as well as Niles and John Strong.
And Kevin.
Oh, and Kevin. Yes, welcome to Kevin.
Thank you.
Kevin Best, our new town attorney. Do you want to introduce yourself to us real quick?
Absolutely. Good evening, distinguished appointed officials of the Planning Commission. My name is Kevin Best. I'm a municipal attorney. I've been practicing law for about 23 years as a municipal attorney. I used to work for the Maryland Municipal League, which was my first civilian job. And so a few months ago, I was called up to interview with the commissioners and was selected to serve as the Poolesville town attorney, which I considered a great honor. I very much enjoy practicing municipal law. So I thank you for having me here tonight.
Welcome. We're excited to have you. All right. We have Joyce as a comment. Joyce, did you want to speak on some particular item or just make a general comment?
There's a specific item on the PowerPoint presentation that I'd like to talk about, and I don't know that it makes sense to talk about it before the presentation.
Heard. Would you like to speak after the presentation but before our discussion?
Sure.
Okay. I'll definitely give you time so that you can make your comments then.
And some general comments around
Yeah, I'll give you time to talk after Niles is finished, but before we begin our discussion, if that works. All right, thank you. Okay, then on to announcements. What's going on, Brian?
I wasn't prepared. I didn't even think about it. I was reading and stuff. Niles, what's going on with the, we haven't,
So
we put a ordinance together for a code of conduct, which would affect all of us here. Basically preventing us or subjecting us to penalties such as removal of office if we use profanities or slurs of any kind in a public setting, as being recognized as a town official. So if you're not being recognized as a town official, meaning you don't really tie yourself to that, then
So we can cuss right now, like as much as we want.
Well,
until it goes into, yeah.
yeah, yes.
When and if it goes into, yeah.
You better live it up.
And
Yeah, I certainly will pass that along if it passes, if it gets moved into, but it's just, we just had a public hearing on it last night, so.
How was the attendance on it?
There was, I think, 4 people were there and commented on it,
Yep. Roughly. Yeah.
roughly. So it was not overwhelming. We've gotten a letter since then, but that's, yeah.
Okay, just curious. Thank you.
But the voices we heard were about 50-50, about some for, some against, some wondering how this would actually get, we wanted to see some more clarity in the definition of the law. And then the letter was against, so probably a little bit more anti than pro so far. And we've got next
Budget season right
budget
now.
yeah, we got some grant requests coming in and stuff like that, so not much else for
Yep.
Planning Commission.
And then for this body, we will have a couple of variances at the next Planning Commission meeting in March regarding decks next door. So we will bring those to you then, and we'll follow up from there. So that's
We are being asked about every meeting, how's the progress? When do we expect the cultural arts?
Yes, we-
Coming.
So
yeah.
Right.
we keep seeing
Which
soon.
we'll talk about that at the end.
All right. Did everyone get the opportunity to review the minutes?
Yes.
Anyone find anything in the minutes they want to discuss?
I make a motion, we approve the 1/14/2026 minutes as written.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Yes.
Yep.
4 for 4, no
Four.
nays, and 1 abstain. Yep,
401.
got it.
Yep.
There is one typo. I will send it to you.
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry.
I totally saw that.
I know.
We're going to stop the meeting for it, but.
All right.
I have like a couple general questions, but I can wait till the end. they don't really have anything to do with this, just sort of like town planning stuff.
Okay,
I'll wait till the end. Okay.
all right, sounds good. I will make a note. Talk to Martin. All right. Let's move on to new business then. Presentation of the Maryland Renewable Energy Certainty Act.
Okay, so give me 1 second here. I'm going to. In a way, makes it easy for Kevin and us to do this, I think. I'm gonna do.
Lower right.
Yep, I'm just going to do actually it here. This is the web one, so they do it a little bit differently. There we go. And then I'm going to go back in here. Oh. Okay. All right, so I'm just going to minimize this. Okay. Okay, so as we talked about, so I'm just going to just make a couple of points. So this is the Maryland Renewable Energy Certainty Act. This is also known as the Senate Bill 931. This bill allows for the creation of solar generating stations through a Public Services Commission process that establishes certain standards, and we'll go through this all in detail. One thing to note is that there is the potential for a solar application in the town of Poolesville. However, there is not one now. There's currently not an application before the Public Services Commission or before the town related to solar generation station. And there is no deadline for us to adopt changes, unlike an act that we will be dealing with later about accessory dwelling units that has a specific deadline of October 1st, 2026. This has no deadline. So the part of why we are going through this is to get ourselves set up so that should an application come in, we've already dealt with the specifics of this act. So that's all just a little bit of background, and then we'll get started here. So, Kevin, do you want to go through sort of the background here with the case and everything?
Yeah, well, what this is this is a statute that modifies the common law, the case law, because back in 2018, in a Washington County case known as Board of County Commissioners versus Perennial Solar, a 2019 case decided by the Supreme Court of Maryland, then known as the Court of Appeals. That case was about like a 10 megawatt solar energy generating system, much larger than many of the generating systems we're talking about under this Maryland Renewable Energy Certainty Act. But in that case, it really expanded case law slightly because it was already the law in Maryland that if public utilities or public utility-like entities who are subjected to the Certificate of Public Need and Convenience process, it's kind of like, it's not a special exception, it's not a variance, but that's what PSC calls it, Certificate of Public Need and Necessity. So if an entity is subjected to that, in the 2018 case, the court expanded already existing public utility law and said specifically for solar generation facilities, solar farms, there's implied preemption, meaning local zoning laws have to take a back seat. They have to step aside and allow the PSC to be the final authority. And a generating facility did not have to go through Washington County's special exception or variance process under the county zoning ordinance. And so what this law here that was just passed last year does, it expands on that. And so the Maryland Renewable Energy Certainty Act codifies the perennial holding in that case but it adds some specifically new protections and carve-outs for local governments that were not present in the 2019 case in Washington County. For example, under the perennial case decided by the Supreme Court, the Supreme Court held that local bodies such as boards of appeals or planning commissions have, and municipalities only have an advisory role to play in the CPCN process at PSC. But under this new act, preemption remains the rule of the day, but the state is prohibited from forcing solar into more than 5% of a priority preservation area. So once that occupancy occurs where you have 5% and you met that threshold, then you can basically kick back in your zoning power and regulate or outlaw or ban new electric generating facilities, also known as solar farms. And then siting standards. Under this new act, the Certainty Act, there's a section of the Public Utilities article that lays out the siting requirements and the mandatory minimums, such as 150-foot residential setback or 15-foot height limitation on the solar arrays. So this new act expands state siting oversight even more. The state has exclusive authority over these solar facilities, electric generating facilities, down to 1 megawatt. And again, in the perennial case, that was a 10 megawatt solar. So I think it's important for you all to understand that these electric generating systems, these solar power systems, are found on the customer side of the meter. They're not centralized. They're considered distributed electric systems because they're all spread out and they're more numerous and they're on the customer side of the meter as opposed to something on the power generation side using high voltage electric transmission lines. That's not what these systems that are going to fall under your purview are going to be. And your role is going to be quite significant in that you'll have joint hearings with the Public Service Commission and you'll have a great deal of input. You just cannot ban and you cannot require by special exception or variance these types of facilities all the way down to 1 megawatt. So if the facility is less than 2 megawatts, they don't go through a full-fledged CPNC process, but they still have to be locally verified. And they have to apply to the Public Service Commission and get the input that they're locally verified to operate up to 2 megawatts. If they're between 2 and 5 megawatt facilities, they'll be allowed to get what's called a distributed generation CPCN certificate from the state, PSC. But the rules on that have yet to come out. But hopefully I've answered or piqued your interest in the transition and the change in law since the case was decided in 2019 up into this new statute that modifies the case law. And so I'll just leave it there. I don't want to take up too much and steal Niall's show.
No, it's okay. You touched on a lot of it. What I'm going to just sort of go back through is sort of just touch on a couple of things that are specifics in it. So just going back to a little bit. So as we talked about, so this law sets sort of standardized permitting for solar and storage projects. Just as a note, we're going to mainly talk about solar generating projects. This act also applies to storage facilities, but they essentially set the same standards, and we are at the moment not facing the potential for a solar storage facility. Right now, the conversation has been about these solar farms. If we go forward with an ordinance, which I'll talk about at the end, we would want something that covers both, because then we're in compliance with the act all around. But for like all of the setback requirements are basically the same, the height requirements, all of that stuff, for both types of things, for the most part. So it's not, this sort of covers both, but we'll talk about solar generating stations. The other note is just at the tail end of the act, they talk a lot about rooftop solar. We don't have any, we have some minimal standards for rooftop solar, but we don't do most of the approval on that. If it's a rooftop solar, we just say, is it on the roof? Is it not overhanging the roof? Okay, you're good. We don't do anything further than that. So the state standards don't really apply for rooftop as well. That's just another thing to note, because we already kind of have that covered in the zoning ordinance already. Okay. So we
Let me
talked.
say something now, if I could.
Yep.
This new act, which took effect on July 1st, 2025, expressly states that a municipal corporation or a county with zoning power cannot ban solar stations or energy storage devices, period.
Right.
So because you don't have a permitted use, again, you're preempted in terms of citing authority on the location and setbacks, et cetera. But technically, your zoning ordinance is in violation of state law as it exists today. So that's what prompts the need to do a zoning text amendment to get the town up to speed with this Certainty Act.
And that comes from, there's a provision in the zoning ordinance that talks directly about solar, but only for on-site use. And the way that you would interpret that is to say that the person using the solar power would be on-site, meaning a rooftop solar or something like that, or a ground-mounted system that is used by the resident, versus a solar generating station being something where it's distributing, as we sort of talked about, distributing power, so going to somewhere else. So that's why in the code, our understanding is that that intent, when it was put in, was intent to limit it to that residential zoning. So just clarity there too.
Let me interrupt also, Niles.
Yep.
In that these systems that go somewhere between 1 and 5 megawatts in electric generation, the whole purpose of these things under the renewable energy legislation, which there have been a number of statutes passed over the years to move Maryland in this direction, the whole purpose is to allow people that rent property or do not have adequate side roofs for solar panels on their own roofs. Maybe they don't own the property. This allows them to join as subscribers and group together and be kind of part owners in a system that's located even in a vacant agricultural area or a brownfield, so that they can take part in using renewable energy. Niles.
Kevin, this is John Strong. One of the things, we're dealing with this in a couple other places too. And one of the things that should be said, so let's assume you have a 100-acre farm and you'd like to put down a 10 megawatt facility. You couldn't fall under that statute because of size, and you can only put one per parcel, if you will. You can't have, do one and then say, oh, I'm going to do this one and this one. So a lot of the companies are looking for smaller lots, which are 25 acres or so, to go ahead and go at it that way. So that's one of the things that you should be aware of.
And our municipal solar array is 1.1 megawatts. And how big is it in area?
It's about 17 acres.
17 acres. So that just gives you a sense of the size of one of these arrays. Just to give, that's not, we didn't talk about that specifically in the presentation, but I think that's worth noting as well. All right. And then, so we talked about, a couple of things. So the process itself is, one of the things, as Kevin said, is having both us and the Public Service Commission sort of advertise a public hearing about any application. So they would get the application, and then it would be our job, along with the Public Services Commission, to hold a hearing. And it expressly says that you hold the hearing in the community, in any community that would be affected by it, either the county or municipality. You can do them virtually, so there would be the opportunity to have a virtual hearing. But the idea is potentially having us host a hearing for the Public Services Commission, at which we could then make a recommendation on the application. So we'll talk about that a little bit later, but I think that's important to note that part of our process is that, and note that the recommendation is a recommendation of the elected body. So what would happen under the discussions that staff has had is that the Planning Commission would make a recommendation to the town commissioners. The town commissioners would then vote on a recommendation to give to the Public Services Commission. So that we are both following our process, and then our process aligns with what the state is talking about here. But the Public Services Commission is also supposed to consider local comprehensive plans and zoning regulations, as long as they don't conflict with state law. And then that goes back to another provision which says essentially that we as a municipality can't deny a site plan that fits the state's requirements, basically. So that's another part of this conversation.
Yeah, let me just add, the siting requirements, or the primary, also known as the primary siting regulations, are found in section 7-218 of the Public Utilities Articles. So it's those minimum siting requirements that cannot be conflictory.
Yeah.
Even if you require site plan review locally in your municipality, your site plan review processes cannot conflict with that section of the Public Utilities Article.
Yeah. And that was the stuff that we talked about here. That's these requirements, basically. And then, so we'll talk about at the end that there are things that the Act doesn't consider. So one example is lot coverage, which is its own interesting conversation at the State House. But, so potentially Poolesville could put in, potentially, like a lot coverage requirement for solar, for a solar generating station. However, as we noted before, it can't either directly or indirectly mean that you ban solar generating stations. So it has to be a standard that is reasonable, more or less, for it. It's sort of the easiest way of saying it, I think. So as we talked about before, you can't use any special exception, conditional use type process, so it has to be sort of a straight review. Only those generating stations that are less than 2 megawatts allowed within the boundaries of municipal corporations. They talk about between 2 and 5 are just not allowed. I believe it is a municipal corporation that is between 2 and 5. 5 and over, there's additional restrictions as well. But
Let me clarify that, Miles.
yeah,
What the law says that if the generating solar farm is between 2 and 5 megawatts,
yeah,
the new upcoming streamlined CPNC, known as the DG CPNC, will not apply to municipal corporations, only apply to unincorporated areas.
yeah.
So what they'll be required to do is either get a full-blown CPNC, it's a more lengthy process, or get a local verification from the local municipality,
Okay.
depending on the size.
Okay,
So
perfect.
that's the differentiation for the DG CPNC.
Yeah, yep. It's a little. This act was very confusing to read. I just want to say that outright. As I was reading it, because it refers to two different processes within the Public Services Commission, and so you have to go through and parse out which one is which one. And then we talked about that. So the other thing to note that the town is what is considered an underserved and overburdened community, which basically you have to deal with public health standards. So rates of asthma, rates of other things like that. And what that means for the purposes of this act is that any applicant who is looking to site a solar generating station in our area would be required to hold 2 additional public information sessions in which they are supposed to take in community feedback. And they're supposed to, in some way, try to address it. Now, the act is completely vague on how the applicant is supposed to address the feedback, but the intent of it is to get, you just essentially have 3 opportunities for community input. The public hearing and these 2 additional community listening sessions, for lack of a better term. So that's another part of this act that is engaged because of our community.
And again, with that, those protected areas for undisturbed communities, I think you all are located in what's called an ag preserve under the county zoning ordinance.
Yeah.
So what that equates to is the 5% rule kicks in. So in other words, the General Assembly is saying that only 5% of the land in that preserved area is allowed to be used for these electric generating facilities. So once the 5% rule cap is hit, then a municipality or the county can deny further applications.
And it's a little bit complicated because we are adjacent to the ag reserve, but not in the ag reserve. But it might be because, say, somebody puts a generation station in the ag reserve, that hits that 5%, then there could be a denial at the county level or things like that. That's a little bit more
We don't have enough
complicated.
property within town limits that we'd ever hit that 5%, do we?
We also aren't protected land. We are a priority funding area, but not, because we are a municipality, we ourselves are not protected land, versus the ag reserve is. So it's that 2 different buckets, so to speak. And then just as a point, as we talked about before, so a lot of this talks about sort of the discretionary zoning authority that we have, but it also says that we can explicitly approve or deny these sort of more basic kind of permits. For basic is the wrong word. Administrative permits. So the grading and sediment control permits, which are done by the county, the building permits, which are done by the county, stormwater management, which is also the county, and then for us, it's the forest conservation plan, so they still have to adhere to the town's forest conservation ordinance. And in that scenario, if the application failed to adhere to the rules set up in the forest conservation plan, then the town could deny an application for that reason, but we'd have to do it within 90 days. If we don't, it's deemed approval. So it's sort of very specific. And then this site plan approvals, so administrative, not discretionary zoning. So again, that goes back to, does it match anything that is not governed by the act?
Regarding the forest conservation, it's a review process. It may not be attaining forest conservation by plantings, because if the area is not large enough to plant, then that creates an issue. And the town at the present time does not have a fee in lieu process, which may mean they have to go to the forest bank to do something along those.
Which we have an established forest bank, but that's just a process point.
But they need to do the NRIFSD process.
This is what we just talked about, why we have to update it with our current zoning. This part is just what staff has kind of talked about, which is basically we need to allow this somewhere to be in compliance with the act. And the zone that makes the most amount of sense is what is our sort of density 25 plus zone, also known as the PRD, which is the sort of our rural transfer zone. Or create a new zone for the purpose of allowing these solar farms. So we can talk about that in a second. Then the other part that we want to talk about is creating a process for that recommendation for the Public Services Commission. So what do we want to consider as relevant information for this body to make a recommendation to the town commissioners, who would make a recommendation to the Public Services Commission? And then create siting standards or setback requirements not covered by the act, such as lot coverage or view shed requirement or something like that, that takes into account some other values that are not expressly covered by the act, that might be something that we want to consider. So those are kind of the main points about like what we could potentially do. And then just for your reference, I just included the zoning, the current zoning map. And so the PRD is the green kind of at the edge of town. And so those are the properties that if we went with that, that could potentially be eligible for a solar generating station to make us compliant with the act. So those are the main points that I wanted to make. I'm happy for any questions or for Joyce's comments, and then we can sort of go from there.
Before you do that, Niles, let me add a few points, if I may. The Bud Road Farm, the Jamison
Yep.
Farm, which acted as a catalyst for us to get to this point, involves what is proposed to be a 2-megawatt facility at the Jamison Farm. That's just an FYI. So that would be a facility that would not need to get a DGCP&C because it's in the corporate limits. You would need a local verification. There's a few other tidbits of information I want to pass along here. Let me just tell you what the Section 7-218 state minimum siting requirements are. It requires a 150-foot setback from homes, a 100-foot setback from the property line, a 15-foot height limitation on the solar arrays, a 35-foot vegetative tree buffer, a view shed study if the facility exceeds 2 megawatts and is near a historic site, cannot be located in a public right-of-way, and the fencing must be 50 feet from the edge or the boundary lines of the property. No barbed wire may be used except around sensitive substations. Chain link fencing is required to use black or green mesh. There can be no light emissions from dawn to dusk. No topsoil removal, minimum grading activity, and a 90% guarantee on plant survival with a surety bond posted at 125% of the cost of the project. So I just wanted to add those as the actual siting requirements that the state has that the municipality will not be able to interfere with.
That was on that page that we looked at, so.
Kevin, real quick, would the town have to have the ability to hold construction bonds during the construction process?
Yes, because that would be a function of your building permit law. Now, is that,
Yeah.
you know, all municipalities are a little different. Your building permits are done by the county?
So the building permits are, we do what is called a zoning compliance permit, which sort of acts as our check. And we also have specific permits. They're referred to as permits in the code
Yeah.
for grading, for driveway, roadways and all of that.
Public infrastructure.
So that's not a siting.
No,
Yes.
they're not, but that's how we get bonds. We issue them a permit for them to get a bond. So it is sort of in that local, I would think, Kevin, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that those would still fall under those administrative permits that we issue.
Yes. I agree. I tend to agree.
Okay.
How about decommissioning bonds? You know, so this.
Oh, that's in the
It becomes
statute.
decrepit, you know, like, and it's falling apart or whatever, like, is there some kind of, you know, means to make sure they clean up the mess?
Yeah, so,
There is one?
so Kevin, there is a process for decommissioning in there, isn't it? I thought,
It's in statute, so you're preempted
yes.
with that. That's something that's a function of either the granted CPCN or the local verification certificate. And it's totally a function of state law, so you can't touch that.
Yeah.
You can't do that?
So we couldn't do that, but the state law has a process.
Okay, good, good.
All right.
All right. Joyce? Need you to state your name, your address. I know we're technically limited to 3 minutes, but if you need, I said technically you're limited to 3 minutes, but if you need a little grace.
All right, thank you very much. Joyce Brenner, 2 Hackett Court in Poolesville. Could you go back to slide number 8?
Sure.
I think it was slide.
Let's see, I just want to make sure which one that is, because they weren't on this version.
Oh, maybe I have the wrong.
No, it's all good. Because that's the packet page is 8. Okay, the commission process, yep.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, right.
This one? Or the next one?
The one where it mentions 2 megawatts. It's a 4th bullet. No. There, right
There,
there.
yeah.
Yeah, could you speak to that a little bit more? I'm not sure that bullet says exactly what
Yeah, so that's what,
saying, and so, because I understood the part about the 2 to 5 megawatt
Yeah.
stuff. So what do you mean by less than 2 megawatts?
so the code, or the law talks about up to 2 megawatts, 2 to 5, and over 5.
Right.
And essentially and that's where, as Kevin was highlighting, the 2 to 5 what the act says is that if it's not located in a municipal corporation, which I first took to mean, and I think Kevin is right, to mean that you couldn't do 2 to 5. But instead, what Kevin is saying is that 2 to 5 involves a slightly different process than under 2. So there's a process for under 2, there's a process for 2 to 5, and there's a process over 5. So that is incorrect, but the language makes it sound that for 2 to 5, it can't be located in the act. This is why I said it was kind of confusing.
Yeah,
Located within a municipal corporation.
the-
What it really means is there'll be other standards for it that we don't know yet and won't know. The act also requires that the Public Services Commission come up with provisions for that by July 1st of 2026. So we don't know that yet.
Right.
But and there might be ways in which we can deal with that.
yeah, I was a little triggered by that, by the way that was stated. So, yeah,
That's fine. And
Okay.
that's just a
okay,
vagueness in how it is written. So.
right, I understand that, okay.
Well, let me clarify how I think this is going to come down. Is that if it's more than 5 megawatts, that's a large generating system. You're probably not going to get those in a municipal corporation. But if it's 2 to 5 megawatts and it's located outside the corporate limits of a municipal corporation, it's going to go through a new process, a streamlined process called the DGCPCN. But if the facility that's 2 to 5 megawatts is in a municipality, it'll go through a full-blown CPCN with PSC, and it'll be a joint hearing. If it's a less than 2 megawatt facility in the corporate limits, it'll be locally verified, meaning the municipality will provide a certificate of some sort that it verified the siting requirements are met when it issues its site plan to the PSC. The PSC will document that, but they will not go through the full-blown CPCN process being located in the municipality if they're less than 2 megawatts.
Okay, great, thank you for that clarification, I appreciate that.
Sure.
In general, I wanted to try to give a little bit of background as my understanding as to why the state went and passed this act of the Renewable Energy Certainty Act. And basically, and I'm not an expert by any means, but the main reason this happened was because the permitting process in Maryland and the different levels of permitting with the different levels of government was so, I want to say intrusive, but that's not the right word. It was so constraining to the advancement of renewable energy generation projects that it was putting the state at a disadvantage. a lot of other states are much further ahead with regards to installation of renewable energy than the state of Maryland. And a lot of that was because of all the regulatory and permitting processes. An interesting juxtaposition is the state of Virginia. Virginia is better and further along with the adoption of renewables than the state of Maryland. And it's not just because they're bigger in land size. So that's one of the things that I wanted to make sure that it was clearly understood by the Planning Commission. A couple other things I wanted to mention was, and I would like you to check on your 1.1 megawatt size on the town's array is correct. The 17 acres, I'm not so sure is correct. If I recall correctly, it's more like 7 acres. And what's happened also is that's an old number. Whatever number it is, it's an old number because solar panels have become more efficient, so you can get more generation out of fewer panels, which equates to fewer acreage. So, I would look into that before you make a lot of decisions that might be based on surface area. The other general thing that I wanted to try to impress upon the commission is that when thinking about all this stuff, I think there's a lot of effort, and I could be wrong, but I feel like sometimes there's a lot of effort in trying to figure out how to keep people from doing things instead of how to engage and how to enhance and make things possible. And I think also that with regards to this kind of thing in particular, and I know you already do think ahead, but this is very, very much needs to be a very strategic 20, 25 years outward thinking approach. People may have hesitations now that 15 years from now they will not have. And I know that's really hard to anticipate, but I think it's really very important to look at these things in a very long view. The other aspect of that is I think a lot about some things called microgrids, and microgrids are a way where a community, and this is a scalable thing. This is scalable from a household, which is basically what I've done in my house, where if the grid is having problems, I can, and I don't even have to do it, it just does it automatically. I disengage from the grid, and my batteries kick in, and I operate my house normally. Now, I don't have all of the hardware needed to make it through a whole year without grid access, but for a stretch of time, I can operate independent of the grid. That is scalable to the community level, and that's where microgrid comes into account. You talked briefly about energy storage. It's referred to storage, but energy back. Generally, we're talking about battery backup storage.
And in the purpose of the act, they're talking about larger facilities versus in-home facilities.
Oh,
That's just what I said.
okay.
But continue.
Yeah. So what you're finding happen across the country is entities, depending on who's doing the project or whatever, they'll have a solar array and then they'll have a battery backup system on site with that system. In the sense of a community microgrid, you could actually have solar and battery backup. And there's a whole, I believe I put it as a part of my commentary submission to the master plan. There's actually a U graph that shows how much storage versus how much solar. And it's sort of like, okay, I want this much solar. If I want this much solar, I have to have that many batteries. And to get a year-round kind of backup system. Can the municipality of Poolesville do that with just the geographic amount of land that they have? I have no idea. I don't know. But, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little long.
You're a little off topic. I think a little bit, maybe.
Yeah, but it really rolls back into,
yeah.
it rolls back into.
If I could just give you like one more minute to
Sure.
focus into your.
So it really rolls back into really thinking long-term and really, really thinking long-term and what the possibilities are for resilience in the community, and looking ahead as to what can be possible for the community, not just how do we have to restrict this so we can't see it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joyce.
So I have a general question that I don't know
Yeah.
if anybody here knows the answer to, but like, so you guys are talking about the farm on Bud Road. So say they were to build their, what is it, 2 megawatt, whatever?
Again, we don't have a site plan, we don't have anything. This is just their general.
How does that energy get back to the grid? Like, do they have the wires?
Yes.
Are they already in place? Do they have
Well,
a way to
so
put them in place?
That's all that they would have to work out as part of their application. So transmission lines, which the act talks
Existing
about a little
lines
bit.
wouldn't work, is that right?
Well, I don't know. I am not technically,
The existing transmission lines that are over by Bud Road, which is, we're talking about that property, are they sufficient to take whatever energy is generated, like at a 2 megawatt, is that what we're talking about? Back to the substation?
You're not looking for the great big wires. If you're looking at poles going down the road and there's 3 wires across the top, that's what you're looking for. If there's only 2 wires, it won't work. If there's 3 wires, it'll work.
yeah.
Okay, and if they have to put their own wires in if there's only 2?
No, that's another issue. Generally, you won't find a solar company try to go into a place where they don't have access to grid connection
Yeah.
anyway.
Okay.
And
And in the process of that, they'll figure out, is there capacity on the line to take it?
So,
Yeah.
so
Okay.
just, this goes back to 2020. The town looked at a couple, where the town was looking at a different project also for that. In a location that was suggested, they found out that there was issues. So they walked away from that site.
so to make that all just set up, the act does talk about transmission lines, but it doesn't give, again, it's sort of part and parcel of the Public Services Commission process. So in other words, we could have input on transmission lines that went through our community. But we don't have any siting standards and things like that. So in terms of our jurisdiction, that question of transmission lines is not really for us to determine. That's on the applicant and that's on.
I'm just thinking that probably if you couldn't use the pre-existing ones, it's probably very expensive and cost prohibitive to put them in.
Probably. And there's I know that, I don't know how common this is, but I know there are some programs where utilities will work with some solar providers
yeah.
to do things like transmission lines. But that's again that's a commercial process than it is.
Let me chime in on that. Transmission lines are typically high voltage.
Yeah, true.
They're very tall structures that hold the wires up. But my understanding, if it's a 5 megawatt or less solar generation farm, solar generation facility, they use low voltage, the same thing that's being distributed throughout the municipality or that area of the county. So the high voltage transmission line issue is not really applicable.
Right.
With these systems, these are considered distributed generation facilities, and they're on the, like I said before, they're on the meter side of the consumer. They're not on the power plant side of everything. So I think just about every one of these facilities that are going to be regulated by the town under the Certainty Act are going to be low voltage and just use line. They just tap into the grid using reverse polarity, that what you're receiving in your house off the lines. So.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
I have a whole bunch of things. I did a bunch of research and like, just questions and things about
Yeah.
zoning. Some of them we've already discussed tonight, some of them we haven't. Should I just send those to you rather than go through them point by point tonight?
I mean, you can if you want.
just
I
send
mean,
them
if
to
there's
you.
general one, if you think that there are broader ones that need discussion, but either way, I'm happy to take them however, and we can incorporate it into a
Yeah,
discussion.
I'll just send them over.
Okay. Sounds.
I mean, one of the ones that we might want to discuss right now quickly is I've read that some towns do something where like they require some degree of like dual use for the solar farms, where like you're actually like there's pollinator gardens, or like you're actually using the land for.
So that is something
We
that we
require
do
that?
at our municipal solar array. There's a pollinator patch
Right.
with it. So there, I don't know what I would say is I don't know how we would, off the top of my head, incorporate that, but I think that's something that we could look at in terms of that administrative sort of process. It's not a way to necessarily oppose it, but a way to, again, sort of create our own standards of use. But I don't know, if there are examples in Maryland that you have, those would be most useful there, because it's operating under the same regulatory
Yeah, okay.
environment.
I can provide you some information later.
Yeah,
Okay, I'll send these to you now.
yeah, that's perfect.
Any other questions or comments?
Just a question about, we'll make a decision about the zoning, where it would go, the process. We'll be updating the use chart, I suppose.
Yes.
All these things, right?
Yeah, and so what I wanted to do is first have a discussion about this.
Yeah.
Kevin and I have had conversations about what the zoning language would look like. So yes, we would add a segment to the use chart that would be a solar generating station. And then as like everything else, we would put in how it would be either P or none,
Yeah.
in the use chart. So we'd do something like that. And then if we thought that, a lot coverage requirement, for example, might be needed, and we could look into that. I mean, again, we haven't, looked into specifically, but say it was, 50% or whatever, like limit on lot coverage on impervious surface or something like that. That's, again, something that we could add in specifically for these, along with the definition. So it'd be a definition, a use, and then those type of zoning requirements that we would deem necessary for the use.
I've got just kind of a question, kind of an observation, just like figuring out what our attitude is here. So it does kind of get to the idea of, are we trying to simply comply with the state law, or are we trying to facilitate more of this than is required? But what's our goal here?
And that's more of a policy question. That is a question for you guys and eventually the town commissioners. The minimum that we should and probably really need to do is comply with the state law. So that involves making changes to take out that on-site to allow or to figure out the use, figure out, where we want it, those things. Because that would make us then compliant with the state law. And then that question of our posture, if you will, towards them is not a staff question, but it's more of a policy question. And so and then we can determine, what shape that takes, as well.
Could I comment again? Is there any risk of getting ahead of ourselves with the 1st of July deadline that the PSC, has to make on these 2.5 to 5
Yeah.
megawatt?
What I would say is, the real question is not so much that deadline, is if, say, in the case of the Bud Road property, they were to submit an application to the Public Services Commission, they already operate under the state law. That July 1st, 2026 deadline has to do with the citing of these specific between 2 and 5 that take place not in a municipal corporation. That's what it's specifically about that.
Okay.
It's not these standards are applicable now.
Gotcha.
And so that's why going through this process and doing it makes sense if indeed what they decide to do is, as Kevin suggests, 2 megawatts and 2 megawatts or less. So like, as I said, we don't have an application right now, but it sort of behooves us to be ready for an application to come in.
Yep.
So the concern would be that if the application came in and we didn't have any of our own statutes or
Yeah.
ordinances, that they would be able to put it anywhere in the town of Poolesville.
Potentially, in part because this is where they could challenge our zoning by saying, you have to allow it somewhere, we want to put it here, you have to allow us,
As long as it meets those
as long as
requirements.
it meets those requirements.
But realistically, there's probably only 2 properties within the town limits that with all those setbacks and everything, that are
going to
meet
fit
that requirement.
anyway.
Is that right, or am I assuming?
That's correct, because if you look at the property on the West Willard side, on the western side of town, which is the Willard property, that's under a conservation,
yeah.
conservation easement, as I understand it,
Yeah,
which may restrict what they can do and what they can't do in there, but that would have to be looked at.
Is there a property over on Cattail?
There is a property on
Yes.
Cattail they could go to.
yeah,
They brought that before us 4 years ago?
That's correct,
Yeah.
that's
Mhm.
correct.
yeah,
Yep,
Windmills.
right.
yeah. And so there are various,
So a lot of the ways that we thought before are gonna change
yeah,
to meet this requirement.
yeah.
I mean, in theory, though, we could, someone could build a smaller array that's still not roof mounted and on, if we're assuming here that we're going for the 25 plus.
Right, and so,
Space. But if we didn't do that,
They'd still have to meet
somebody could come in.
but it's 2 megawatt or less, it still would have to meet the requirements.
Right.
of
For
the,
But on a
setbacks and everything
smaller
else.
plot,
Yes.
it's possible.
that becomes a separate question about the economics of doing it, that is not, like we have, so, or currently in the zone, you can have a ground-mounted system on your property, that's the on-site thing. And there are setback requirements to that are not really what this act is talking about per se. Because what it also defines what these type of systems are. And generally, they are of a scale that meets these sort of certain
Don't you,
requirements.
correct me if I'm wrong, you need a pretty good sized piece of property, like with all those setbacks and like the certain feet of bushes and all those
Yes,
things. Like you
yes.
can't just put it on any little small.
Correct.
Like
And
you're not gonna-
that's where like the vegetative buffer is 35 feet in width anyway. So you have a setback and you have to do that and those type of stuff. So you're looking at bigger properties, and that's the intent, I think, is to cover these type of properties.
Okay.
So one of the projects, I had this discussion tonight with Jason at our office. One of the properties they're looking at is off of Sundown Road, which is in Montgomery County. It's not within the municipality. And that particular property is 35 acres,
Right.
and it falls under this category. And the discussion again was forest conservation and stormwater management and all the things that they have to go through in the designing process. So once they start into it, for permitting purposes, you're probably looking at 6 to 9 months before it gets built. And my understanding, in order for these things to be profitable, is it's a quick turnaround process. Because if it drags out, then the costs make it unmanageable.
And then a question for the attorney, was it Kevin?
Yes.
So if we're in the process of changing the zoning like we clearly are here, we don't necessarily, we're not legally we're not legally obligated to follow like the old zoning if we're in the process of changing it, is that right?
Well, until the ordinance is passed, that would be the zoning text amendment ordinance, and the effective date arrives, making the ordinance effective, you can't apply the new zoning standards to an existing application. So an application comes in early, you're going to be kind of stuck with the shot clock. You get 60 days.
Yeah.
I guess there are some practical ways to hold things up, short of passing a moratorium, and that's just basically dragging your feet a bit on some of the other permitting. And hopefully before you get a final decision, you can get the ordinance in place. But I don't know how difficult it's going to be, or problematic if you were to have someone come in with an application before you could get to the end game with a zoning text amendment, because you're already beholden to the setbacks and the other siting requirements of state law. It's just, I guess it goes to what classification of land that they would be able to put it on.
Right.
And they're also constrained by, they need minimum size lots and parcels. So 90% of the lots in town are not going to be able to accommodate. So I just don't know what the sense of urgency, how much it's really real.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
So how do you want to proceed? Like
So,
like,
I think the
some draft
question
language
is-
together for a ZTA and
So-
we'll talk about it next month, or?
Yeah, that's what we could do. Kevin and I have sort of talked a little bit about what that language could be, and we could sort of share that with you next month and sort of start there. Is there any specific questions or ideas that you want us to consider, or research that you want us to do that would tie into specific language? Or do you want to just see it and then you can have more thoughts or feedback?
I'd like to just see like a draft and then sort of like
Sure.
work it out from there, but I'm going to send you all the things
Yeah.
that I came up with. Again, I'm just going to send you the whole list. Some of them we've talked about and just in order.
That's fine, and we can create answers and just do it that way.
What are the existing lot coverages, in,
So that's a good question. And again, this is for main buildings, which is its own different animal. But in the zoning ordinance, which we'll get here up, and then go to, perfect. Okay, so in the PRD, the maximum lot coverage by main and accessory buildings is 10%. But that is to make sure that you don't have a huge house on a huge piece of land. And so, that is what it is right now. The maximum height of a building is 50 feet. The minimum front building line is 10 feet. And then we have 17 feet for the side setback, 50 feet for on a corner lot, and then rear line setback is 35 feet. So those are, again, for a main building, so it's a different, because the lot coverage and things like that is all built around there being a residence on a piece of property, not as much a solar generating station or something like that.
I think it's a little interesting also on the Montgomery County side, because they, in the past, have not considered the arrays. And when we went through this with this array here, they did not consider, they've initially thought it was going to be, they were going to call it lot coverage and also stormwater management as impervious surface. They don't. They say it's pervious.
Makes sense. I just don't see that we as a group have a lot to discuss. There's so many checks or whatever that the state has put in place that we cannot amend or adjust, that this is really like, what 3 items are we going to look at?
Exactly.
And so, yeah, I think it's great that you've done some good research. I would love to see what you've got. So looping us in early might be great.
Yeah.
But I think there's just not a lot that I see that we can do.
And that is the overall sense from the act, but it's more, I just wanted to not just give you, here's what our thought of an ordinance is. It's, here's the conditions under which we are talking about this, so that you are informed in that way about what we're trying to do.
Yeah, we can't be more restrictive than the state
Yeah.
for this one, so. Okay, shall we move on with the understanding that we will look at that ordinance next month?
Yep.
Awesome. Mr. Best, are you staying with us or are you moving on?
What is your pleasure, Madam Chair?
Well, you're welcome to join us for the CAD discussion, but I also know that your time is money, and you were here primarily for the first part. Am I correct?
That was our intent for having him for this meeting, was for this part.
Okay.
Yep, okay.
All right.
Have a good night.
Good night, sir.
You too.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joyce.
Thank Joyce.
Always a pleasure to have your insights. All right.
All right, so let me just go to here.
Let's say Niles, you want to kick us off on this?
And okay. So a couple of quick things to start, and then we can sort of put into it. What I basically did is I took the ordinance that you guys saw, most of you saw in October, and added in the pieces that came from our last discussion, which was about the guidelines, which I know you weren't here for last month, but we can talk about that too. And what I did is, as we said, is we basically have in the ordinance the guidelines adopted by reference, so they are referred to directly as the cultural arts design guidelines, and I can tweak it if we want the full name that we had put up previously. But trying to tie it in with how we've talked about these things in the past. Then the other thing is that we confirmed last time about the parking, that we wanted to do it sort of on a case-by-case basis, which was already in the ordinance. I tweaked the language slightly to reflect our last discussion and make it more clear. And then and then for the design guidelines themselves, I made the changes that we discussed. Specifically, I had made for the staggering, I made the minimum stagger 5 feet and the maximum setback 10 feet from adjoining properties, basically, because our discussion last time was how we want that stagger and how do we want it, because there's some discussion about how it would impact. So it would be overall or from adjoining buildings, and that's how I addressed that topic. And we can tweak the language if we need to. The only other thing that isn't a part of it, one is that Kevin added, I didn't add it in, but he sent me the whereas part that just basically gives the authority. So when this goes to the commissioners, it will be added that. That is boilerplate. It doesn't need to be reviewed in this context. And then the other thing that will be added is a new zoning map. You looked at the zoning map earlier. It would just add the CAD in that area that we had previously discussed. And that, like all zones, is done by the zoning map. So it's not described in the ordinance itself. It is the map describes it, for lack of a better term. And so I just wanted to make that note as well. Are there any questions? First off.
get a chance to read it? Have a look. Questions?
I had one question about the sign.
Yes, this was done before you, I think before you had,
Okay, just the only question I had was, it was the, there's a temporary sign
Yes.
section. And I wasn't clear how the content part related to the temporary sign part, because is that?
That's a good
is-
question.
Is that like a temporary sign for the business before a permanent sign's there?
yeah, so if you look at, it is packet page 39, which begins the sign code part of it. If you go to, sorry, page 40, if you go to temporary signs, this, basically, we got into this whole discussion about how you can't really regulate what a sign says. So we had to take out a bunch of regulations that we previously had that went into operating certain times where you can get it or not, and how you can have it before things or after things for special events and things like that. So what we did is we streamlined what the temporary signs are and had general standards for it, generally for the commercial zone in general. And then what we had simply done for the temporary signs in the cultural arts district is made them just a little bit smaller to fit in with the overall idea that we didn't want excess clutter in the cultural arts district versus in the commercial zone in general. So the idea was to take out all of that language because, like, we talked about political signs and a whole bunch of different signs where there were specific language about what you can and can't put in there. And so the temporary sign was streamlined to do that. I can look back again and see if we want to say, like we had before, about business name and hours of operations, but that was generally what we had previously done, but that gets into, there is some constitutional questions about regulating.
Yeah, and that's what on page 47, that content
Yes.
limits are
Yeah,
there.
and they're there. And so that's something where we can, that was, again, standard from before, and I can look back on what I had said, because we did them simultaneously. So we were trying to make them smaller signs that kind of just had this. And these as guidelines have a little bit of flexibility in them.
And once this is done, is the attorney gonna like review all?
So the attorney has reviewed all of this.
Oh, he already has, okay.
Yes. And so he gave, other than adding in the boilerplate, he had no other direct comments, so. You have,
Is this document pending any grammatical or
yeah,
insignificant changes is ready for?
we could send it to the commissioners. And that was the conversation I had between what I'd written on Friday and the conversation with Wade yesterday. We had a discussion that we can just send this on to the commissioners as long as you have no other changes. And then the commissioners will have a public hearing on it. And so then we can, if we get feedback from property owners or things like that at that time, there's a possibility that they'll say, hey, can you go back and address these specific questions? Or the commissioners might do it themselves, which is also a possibility.
I have a question. And
Yeah.
it's maybe dumb. It's on page 35 where we're looking at the table of uses, but
Yeah,
what is FA?
hang on 1 second. A floor area, I believe, is what it was.
Floor area?
Yes. Because that was the standard. I think what I did is I tried to summarize it to make it, I'll look back at what the zone says, but I remember it being floor area, and I can add that as a
That would
as a
make sense.
notation. Because,
I would like a definition of that because there's a difference between gross living area, gross building area, gross leasable area. What does floor area mean?
that is a good question.
Yeah.
Do we have it?
Back in the day.
Because these are, the FA is on things that are not residential, not living.
Right.
Correct.
Well, yeah, I know it's
There
not
is in
gross living area,
business-
but my point is that there are
So in the-
multiple definitions of area.
So in the discussions that I recall many, many moons ago, was that floor area is the area in which you can put your products out on the floor.
Okay.
Whereas storage rooms and things like that can fall into it.
I think
But-
that might just need some clarification.
And so, I just was trying to make it as compact as possible for the
Yeah.
text.
That gets
Because
weird.
that page going back to the zoning ordinance is quite long.
John's definition gets weird when you look at the one thing, funeral parlor.
Well,
Products on the floor.
Products on the floor.
Put your stuff on the floor.
so I was just checking, and so, just to make sure I check the zoning ordinance, and floor area is not in the definitions. It is just used, so FA is, I used FA in here, but it's floor area in that entire section. So that is the term of art that was used in the code.
It sounds like a retail term.
Yes.
So floor versus.
Yes, I think it
so
it
where
was.
customers are versus where.
And I know that for when we were talking about restaurant, right, it's one space for every 100 feet devoted to patron.
Right.
Which in that case is a little bit more clear, and then per employee. But, so in that case, it is the area where patrons are sitting versus in, say, a retail store where it's like CVS, it's the total area
Minus the storage.
minus those storage rooms. And on plans, those are all called out. So it's an easy calculation to make.
Except if we're pushing mixed use, would there be a different definition?
So generally what happens is that those type of spaces are also called out on plans. So like where offices are labeled offices, like this is where you get into looking not just at site plans as we generally do them, but plans, the architectural plans. So there's say office. And we've done that for commercial properties before. We've looked at, here is the area where you are selling goods. Here is the office space. And then we tell them, yes, this meets or it doesn't. And then we have that conversation.
That was my only real question. Everything else is formatting and other.
And note with formatting is that some of the formatting will change because we have to make these changes and put it back into the zoning ordinance. Like, I tried to make it as consistent for the purposes of this, just to get it to you. But that's just a minor thing.
Yeah. No, I think it looks really good. This is a lot of effort and time, and thank you so much.
No problem. And I went through it all again on Friday just to make sure that I hadn't missed anything as well. But you looked like you had a question.
Yes, question. So the ordinance includes this appendix plus the design guidelines and
Yes.
the,
Sign design guidelines, yeah.
and the goals as well, right? The goals of the,
Oh, yeah, sorry, yeah.
as part of the ordinance?
That's part, so what will happen is technically it won't be in the ordinance, but because they are by reference.
Yeah.
Okay, and I can clarify the reference point to make it clear, but the goals are the goals in each section are part of those design guidelines and such.
Oh,
That all gets adopted by reference to it in the code. So rather than inserting a page, what we tell people, if you look at the village overlay zone, which is the easiest comparison to make, if you look on our website, it has there's the zoning ordinance, and then it has the design guidelines. And the ordinance tells them to reference the design guidelines. So they have that document, and then, like they did next door, they just went through it piece by piece. And then what we did administratively is we have a checklist that says this is everything that the design guidelines tell us. And then we look at the plans and we go, yep. And that's how the two get administratively done. So it's not technically in the ordinance because, again, it's 100 pages long. These type of things are accessory documents that don't apply to everyone. They apply to people doing these in a specific place. So we keep them separate just for the organizational purposes. So it won't be in the ordinance, it will be referenced in the ordinance.
okay. And where does it define the border, the area of the?
That's where it goes by the map. So just like, so what I'll sort of pull this up here again if I can do it. So the zoning map calls out all of the zones, and so I'm going to zoom in a lot here. So what's going to happen, it's not on this copy because it's not adopted. This is the adopted zoning. So if you can see, what we're going to do, And I'll just sort of go here and sort of show you,
MPCOM.
is John is going to pick another color. We're going to shade in the part
Yeah.
where it's defined, where you guys talked about.
We had already outlined this once before.
Yeah.
When we started doing it.
Yeah.
And so it will just be added, and
Okay.
that's the reference to it. What's supposed to happen is, again, when you're looking at your property and you're trying to develop it, you're supposed to look at the map and say, oh, it's in this zone. Then look at all the references to that zone in the ordinance, and then adopt your approach. But it's not defined geographic, like spelled out.
Yeah.
Don't say the boundaries of this street.
Yeah, gotcha.
Boundaries of this street. You're supposed to reference this.
I see. Okay. And, sorry, another question. The use chart then in section 3,
Yeah.
does that go in like this, like everything?
Yes, so the current use chart, if you look at the zoning ordinance now,
Yeah.
has a chart with all of this in. What we are doing is adding in that column and any of the changes we made back when we made all the changes. So we changed the various uses. So wherever it's in red, that specifically will go into the zoning ordinance in this format.
Okay.
Because that's the format we've previously
Yeah.
done. I'm going to try again to make it a bit more compact in formatting, for formatting purposes.
Yeah.
Maybe widen some boxes, narrow some boxes, but for the most part, this is
Right.
as it is.
And there'll be things in here that'll have to be changed because of our previous discussion about energy transmission lines.
Correct. But given everything that we are doing here, and we put in stuff like the sign stuff, having it as two separate ordinances is easy enough for us to manage, because we'll just take all of these changes, put it in,
Yeah.
then the next ordinance will come and we'll make those changes and put it in, and then we just keep updating it. So the code and the ordinance end up being living, in that sense, living documents. So they just keep getting updated as you make changes. So same when we did the chicken coop ordinance, we specifically call out, and that's why we call out which section things go in, so that I can put them in at the end and be like, this goes under this section, that kind of thing.
Right. And kind of last question is, do the folks that are living in the cultural arts district, are they being notified, or will they?
We sent letters to every property owner when we did the survey. When we did the survey, saying that we were going to make this change. Now, they have not seen the full text of the ordinance. That's part of what the public hearing process is for. So when it is released, we'll say, hey, here's this ordinance. We'll have the commissioners will introduce it. There'll be a public hearing date. Everybody will be able to come up. I've had individual conversations with maybe half a dozen property owners that have just come in on their own and asked various questions. None of it was specific or required. It was more just generally, what are you guys trying to do? And then we've had, of course, the one property where there's been development work done. We've informed them directly that this was happening, and that your questions about residential, and specifically this idea of mixed-use residential, for lack of a better term, was specifically something that we told them.
Yeah.
So they are pursuing at their pace, what they're trying to figure out, but we've told them over and over again on a variety of issues that these are ongoing things.
Okay. Thanks.
So we'll see this one next month as well.
So if you have no major changes, what I would recommend we do is send me the edits. I can send it around. But if you want to adopt pending administrative changes or recommend pending administrative changes, this ordinance, we can put it for the commissioners as their next step, unless you want to see it again.
I am very happy with all the work we have done.
I'll make a motion that we recommend to the commissioners to adopt the ordinance, to amend zoning ordinance of the town of Poolesville to create a cultural arts district, Appendix B,
With administrative changes.
with administrative changes. Thank you.
Do I have a second?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Looks like we're gonna get that one done. Feels
job.
good.
Job, yes.
I told Jim we would get that done before the flag committee was finished redoing the flag. so.
Yeah.
I do want to mention some of us that were here for the village overlay plan, and I was, and I neglected, and I'm sorry that I should have gotten everybody else an invitation to their open house.
Okay,
Yeah,
missed it.
you missed it. But I would recommend, they're very willing to show you the models. It's a fantastic,
Very
it
nice.
is really well done. And I hope it looks as good as we anticipate it looking when it's done. I think it will. But inside, it's a really good product.
Yeah.
That's good to hear, that's
Yeah.
good to hear. Yeah, I really wanted to be there. I unfortunately had an emergency and had to miss it that day.
I just three,
If you have any trouble, just say Jim Brown said you could.
Just name drop Jim Brown.
before we adjourn, just three quick things. When does the town plan to start implementing the streetscape, like, and making the road safer?
Great question. So we have the 30% plan of the streetscape plan in our possession. We plan to have the 90% one in May, 100% in June, and then we have to go into the bidding process, and then the plan is to have that resolved by August. That is the current deadline in our agreement with the engineer for the state. So they are driving it. John is providing comments, which I literally got before this meeting, but they are driving it. So we have to get comments back on the 30% plan by the 24th. John just gave them to me tonight, so we will have them in way before then. But that's the current status and sort of deadline. That is all, as we say, subject to change. But that
Okay,
is the deadline.
just one comment about the whole thing. Is there anything you can do, the town can do, to do away with the whole, like, turn situation?
So there's,
Like, the sooner the better on that, because I
Yeah.
live right here, obviously, and I see people, like, almost get hit, like,
right.
relatively frequently, because people go around the person that's stopped for the crosswalk,
Yeah.
thinking that they're turning, and it's really
Yeah.
sketchy.
Well, I think that specific issue, I mean, there's going to be a turn lane no matter what. That's
Right.
part of what a center turn lane. I think in terms of what we can do to prevent that, we've tried
But
to.
turn lane is fine, because like you have
Yes.
somebody turning and then the traffic flow.
Yes.
And the pedestrian can see that and
Yes.
the car can see the pedestrian. The problem now is that when, like, if there's a big truck or something and they can't, the person behind the truck doesn't see the lights, they kind of go at speed and go around.
Yes.
And then slam their brakes on because there's somebody walking right in front of the car, and that's
Right.
super, super dangerous.
Oh, no, yeah, what I'm trying to think through is, because that's more the issue there isn't the street design. It's the fact that people don't pay attention, like,
They're
not,
disobeying the right-hand turn lane.
right, they are disobeying the law. You're supposed to wait behind
Of course.
the person,
Now-
and that,
There's a policeman who's been sitting up there
Yes.
on a regular basis now.
yeah. And so that's been our main response is through enforcement. I'm just trying to think from a design point of view or anything else. There's not much more we can do. We have
You
the,
would have to restrict the lane down to nothing.
Yes.
To a single lane, but then you create another problem
yeah,
with exiting and
with people coming in and out,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm just trying to think, we'll think about it more if there's something.
Once
that we think
streetscape is done, the problem will be solved, right?
It will be partially because the road will be narrower, and partially because, or the
Right.
travel lane will be narrower. And partially because the center turn lane will be better defined, so people turning
Right.
will be more defined in the turn lane versus now where it's kind of two lanes, but kind of not.
I'm just saying, the sooner that can be done, what
Yeah.
you just said, like, probably the better. The other quick things, everybody's heard about the whole, debacle down there at Locktown on the canal where the sewage is spilling into it. We don't have any risks here with sewage spilling into, like, the aquifer, do we? Like, I mean, we don't have, like, any kind of a,
we maintain the system on a really strict basis. What happened there was, I suspect, and I don't know for sure, that line was an old line
yeah.
and there's certain things you can do and certain things you can't do. Now, we've lined most of our lines, so they have a poly line inside the existing concrete. In fact, we're getting ready to do
Up on Fisher.
Up on Fisher, which we know that there's problems with, and we're gonna take care of that. So our system's much different than
Okay.
that.
And then the last thing, just a suggestion, again, living close to the electric chargers over here, it's almost like a battle for them now. Like people
Yeah.
are coming and like unplugging other people's things and plugging it into
Yeah.
theirs in the third space and all. We probably could use more electric chargers, but that's all. And
Right.
Just,
Yeah. No, I appreciate that.
yeah. Yeah. And that kind of falls under planning purview.
Yeah, that's, yes, but it's more of a budget question, and we can talk about that. We can
Yeah.
add it to our discussion at that point, so.
All right, with that, I'm gonna make a motion, we adjourn.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Sorry to keep you here 10 extra minutes.
We're good.
Fine. We are done at exactly 8:30.